Now let's take some time to talk about scale sets, and maybe you've heard the term in the industry, cattle versus pets. And scale sets is really a lot around that. Traditionally, if we wanted to scale up an application, we would add more CPU, memory, disk, etc. But scale sets allow us to essentially scale horizontally. So when we want to scale out our virtual machines, we simply stamp out additional ones to meet the demands and then scale back in when that seasonal demand is slowed down, for example. If we look at this, we can define virtual machine scale sets in Azure, also known as VMSS. You can use the portal, PowerShell, or the API, and you'll see a demo of that a little bit later on. But you define the number of instances you wish to run, the instance size, etc. Do you want to scale beyond 100 instances? Do you want to use managed disks? You define everything around your instances there, and then we determine if we want to auto scale. So keep that in mind. A lot of people think of scale sets as, oh, do I have to use auto scaling? Well, you don't have to. You can go in there and choose to scale up and down as you want to, but you can auto scale if you wish. And auto scaling really is around setting a minimum and maximum amount of instance sizes. So you could say have a default amount that you start out with that you always have to have like a minimum of 1, but we want to scale up to maybe 10 as an example, or maybe we go with a minimum of 2 just to ensure we have that availability as we talked about in availability sets. But then I want to scale up for load as well. We can scale out based on a variety of metrics, and these can be infrastructure or application metrics. And this is really important because Azure ties everything together. We can use things like App Insights to look at the application metrics, say like transactions that are happening on a web server and scale out based on that. Or we can scale out based on traditional infrastructure metrics like CPU, etc. We can also scale out based on a schedule as well. So if we know that at a certain time of the year, let's say a lot of retailers on Black Friday, for example, need to scale out for demand there. We know on schedule, we don't need to wait for the application to be hit hard. We can already preemptively start scaling out. So schedule-based helps in that instance. And finally, you do need to remember to account for sessions when you scale in. Very often, we always want to create a scale in rule at the same time as we create our scale out rule. So we know when demand goes down, we scale in. But if we've got a lot of users with sessions on specific web servers, they're not going to maintain their session if they scale in. So we need to account for that by using things like Redis cache, etc. when configuring auto scaling in rules. So hopefully you can see now there's just a lot of power in treating scaling in this manner, and we'll see more of that in the subsequent demo here.